This is Judith Lay welcoming you to Manx Radio and to the podcast of this week's edition of At Your Service.
Manx Radio!
As I'm sure you can imagine, this past week in Rome has been a roller coaster of emotions.
A voice that's very familiar to many of us here on the island joins us this morning from Rome to help us reflect on the life, death and legacy of Pope Francis. And the voice? It's Canon Philip Gillespie, Rector of the Beda College in Rome, where men from English-speaking countries all around the world come to be trained to be Roman Catholic priests. And we'll hear more from Canon Philip after our opening music, Sir John Rutter's beautiful, prayerful setting of those familiar words, "The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want." The Lord is My Shepherd from Sir John Rutter's Requiem, performed there by the City of London Symphonia and the Cambridge Singers, conducted by Sir John Rutter himself. And the psalm that contains those words was just one reading from the Bible included in the Requiem Mass for Pope Francis, celebrated in St Peter's Square in Rome yesterday morning. Let's hear now from Canon Philip Gillespie as he joins us to take us on a journey from Easter Sunday to today.
It was only last Sunday, Easter Day, that the Holy Father, Pope Francis, made an appearance on the balcony of the facade of St Peter's Basilica. He spoke few words. "Brothers and sisters," he said, "I wish you a good and a happy Easter." After the blessing, he delighted the pilgrims by taking to the Popemobile and driving through the square, and indeed beyond the square, into Via Conciliazione to greet people. His voice was weak and his gestures limited, but little did we think that within 24 hours we would be receiving the saddest of news, the news of his death. Nor did we think that we would celebrate on Saturday morning his funeral at the Vatican, and then his burial at the church much loved by him, the Church of Santa Maria Maggiore, St Mary, on the Esquiline Hill here in Rome. When making any foreign journey, Pope Francis would come to St Maria Maggiore to entrust himself and his visit to the care and protection of Mary, Salus Populi Romani, the health and protectress of the Roman people. I was privileged and honoured on Saturday morning to participate in the funeral liturgy, the Requiem Mass at St Peter's Basilica in the Vatican. It was a most splendid and inspiring liturgy, and a beautiful celebration of the life and the hope of Pope Francis, Pope of the Universal Church, but also, as he would frequently emphasise, Bishop of the City and Diocese of Rome. This was also a local church expressing its gratitude for the kind and gentle way in which Francis inspired and led by his example. Pope Francis was, as the Italians would say, una persona per bene, a person for the good. He was good to others, attentive to their needs, attentive in a particular way to the needs of the marginalised, the not noticed, the victims, the refugees. He inspires us and challenges us, be a person for the good. He asked that his funeral should be marked by sobriety and humility. Now, that's not easy when you are dealing with a lying-in state when over 200,000 people wanted to spend a moment to acknowledge the impact of this man, this bishop, this pope, and indeed even a greater numerical gathering yesterday, including heads of state and of government. It was a grand celebration on a grand scale, and with the resources and the space for the liturgy to be celebrated grandly. However, it did not feel pompous or removed. It was, in fact, at its heart, exactly the same liturgy which will be celebrated in our churches on the island for each and every Christian soul who comes to us to seek the prayer and intercession of the Church. At meetings, at the Angelus prayer on a Sunday, in his writings, he would often end with a request, "Non dimenticatevi di pregare per me." Please don't forget to pray for me. Well, the Church and the world over these days has not neglected to pray for him. Now we need to ask him to pray for us, to inspire us and to accompany us on this pilgrim way of faith and of love. And in this Jubilee year, especially our pilgrim way of hope.
Thank you, Canon Philip Gillespie, talking to us from Rome, reflecting very movingly on the events of this past week. And there'll be some news about Canon Philip himself later in the programme. The Sistine Chapel Choir is the oldest choral institution in the world. It's accompanied the life of all the popes since the early centuries of Christianity, surviving difficult times along the way. But it continues to function in the same way today, and yesterday provided the simple, prayerful Gregorian chants that Pope Francis requested. There were no hymns. Pope Francis had made it very clear that his funeral mass should be as modest as possible. He said it should be the funeral of a pastor and disciple of Christ, and not of a powerful person in this world. The Sistine Chapel Choir are here singing the famous Miserere by Allegri, as we also hear some thoughts from two leading priests. Monsignor John Devine, who's based in Douglas and is the senior Roman Catholic priest here on the island, but who has recently announced his intention to retire at the end of the summer, and Archbishop Malcolm McMahon, soon to become Archbishop Emeritus, as he retires as leader of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Liverpool, of which the Roman Catholic Church on the island forms a part. We hear first the voice of Monsignor John Devine.
Someone shared with me yesterday, it was a made-up picture of two figures walking along the road, a rear view of them. One of them was obviously Pope Francis, and the other one was obviously Jesus. And it was obviously a reference to the famous story on the first day of the week, the resurrection, on the road to Emmaus, where Jesus walked unrecognized with two of his followers.
One of my last memories of him, last time I visited Rome was in January, and I attended the first audience of the new year, the general audience, lots of people there. That was a very joyous occasion because at the end of the audience, at the beginning of this holy year, there were circus performers, jugglers and tumblers, acrobats and all sorts. And there were also two elephants. Of course, they were like pantomime elephants. They had people in them. They were very realistic, though. The Pope absolutely loved them. He loved all the performers. He particularly loved these elephants. And when the baby elephant kind of snuggled up to him, he was laughing and was so happy. And so that's a very enjoying memory for me.
It's been said that he has a thirst for faces, that it was contact with the people that he craved. Reflecting on his funeral, there was a feeling that it was very much about him being the Bishop of Rome rather than the spiritual leader of 1.6 billion Roman Catholics around the world. There was all the time the feeling of this pull back to simplicity, humility.
He's only Pope because he is Bishop of Rome. And all the bishops, including Archbishop Malcolm, are successors of the apostles. And he's the first among equals, as it's called. So he is the presiding bishop, and it goes with the See of Rome. But I think on the day of when it was announced his election, he came on the balcony. He referred to himself always as the Bishop of Rome, which is the ancient tradition. It's not just playing down some reality that isn't there, but that's part of the tradition.
Pope just means Papa, Father, and that's been one of his titles, as Monsignor John has just said. It's the Bishop of Rome, which is his main title. But he always struggled for simplicity, in this role. Like he didn't wear all the fancy bits that he could have done, the gold cord around his neck and the red bits with fur on and all those things, that fancy stoles, all the things that other popes have just taken as a matter of course because that's the usual normal dress.
The award-winning film Conclave, whilst it was based around the fictional election of a pope, nevertheless gave us an insight into how a pope is chosen. All the cardinals, the highest-ranking clergy in the Roman Catholic Church, who haven't reached the age of 80, will be locked in the conclave and will be entitled to vote in a series of secret ballots. Cardinals over the age of 80 are available to share their wisdom and experience in discussions before the conclave starts. And that's expected to be in about 2 weeks from now. 4 cardinals from the UK are in Rome now and will remain there until the new pope is chosen. 3 of them will be among the 135 voting cardinals. They're Cardinal Vincent Nichols, Archbishop of Westminster and leader of the Roman Catholic Church in England and Wales, Cardinal Timothy Radcliffe, who for some years was the worldwide leader of the Dominican Order of Priests, whose particular calling is to preaching, and Cardinal Arthur Roach, a Yorkshireman who spent much of his priestly ministry working in the Vatican, having almost daily contact with the late Pope. A 4th cardinal, Michael Fitzgerald, who lives and works in an inner-city Liverpool parish, is also in Rome. He can't vote as he's over 80 years of age, but he's got vast experience. He's a leading expert in Christian-Muslim relations and has devoted much of his life to develop interfaith understanding. And he'll be available to join in conversations before the conclave starts, as Archbishop Malcolm now explains.
Those congregations, as they call them, of the cardinals, before the actual conclave, when they're locked in with the key, conclave, that's what the word means, and they are where they discuss the kind of person they want, and almost they will examine the state of the church and see which direction it's going in and who will be the best person for that. So it's about a person's specification, shall we say, rather than an actual name.
It's leadership, okay, which might sound obvious, but also it's about unity. It's bringing people together, the idea of being in communion with Rome. So Archbishop Malcolm is in communion with the Bishop of Rome, and so is the Archbishop of Los Angeles is in communion with Rome, and that makes Los Angeles and Liverpool in communion with each other. It's almost like spokes of a wheel. He's the one that holds the church together, which also implies that there can be different ways of doing things and different cultures and different approaches in different parts of the world, but we're all one church.
The Pope's job as well, as part of this holding things together, is to pass on the tradition of the Church, to receive it and then to pass it forward. Now, that doesn't mean that the doctrine that he's received and passed on hasn't in some ways been opened up or developed in that sense, not in terms of changing things. So, for example, the recent work that the Pope has been encouraging on what we describe as synodality, which is really walking together on the road together, is really to say to the Church, look, in the Second Vatican Council, there was a lot about the lay person's role in the Church, and this hasn't really happened in quite the way that the Council Fathers envisaged. So what we're doing is we're opening this up to listening to each other deeply, so that lay people's voices are heard. In fact, all people's voices are heard, and are heard without interruption. And we hope that this will then enable us to reflect on each other's opinions and others' positions so that we can find a way forward together. Now, that's a development, but it's not a development of doctrine. The doctrine's already there. It's the way we do it.
This is something on a world stage, isn't it?
Above all else, I think that's what Pope Francis did. He actually put it even more on the world stage. And it was interesting, the recognition of his authority, his personal authority and integrity was something that people recognized outside the boundaries of the Christian churches, even collectively.
A lot of that to do with his personality, of course, and the way he engaged with people. But also I think it's to do with his office as well, because the office is one of stability and unity within a world which is rather fractious and chaotic at the moment. And I think so many people of different faiths or no faith at all are very grateful for the gift of a Pope to the world.
So, how does it feel to be one of the cardinals who will vote in the conclave? Let's hear from Cardinal Vincent Nichols, created cardinal by Pope Francis 11 years ago. How does he feel as he faces the responsibility of being a part of the conclave who will choose the next pope?
It's intimidating, actually, never having been in a conclave before. But I think what I hope to find is once those doors are shut, then there's a very clear, shared, intense focus on how do we discern what the will of God is. That's the only way of approaching it. And discerning the will of God can be tricky because we put to try and distinguish between what my conviction might be and what I have to listen to. So I hope nobody goes into this conclave, as it were, with the sole purpose of wanting to win. I think it's very important that we go in wanting to listen to each other, to promptings that we get, maybe a phrase somebody uses, maybe a conversation over the table, maybe a sense of movement among this group of people who have been entrusted with this task. But it's not my will. It has to be together trying to sense what God wants next, not just for the church. There was a prayer used the other day, and we prayed that the church might be a leaven for the renewing of the human family. And that has to be the perspective which Francis has showed us.
My thanks to Canon Philip Gillespie, who joined us this morning from Rome, to Cardinal Vincent Nichols, Archbishop of Westminster and leader of the Roman Catholic Church in England and Wales, who'll be one of the 135 cardinals who will vote in the conclave to choose the next pope. And my thanks also to Monsignor John Devine, senior Roman Catholic priest here on the island, and Archbishop Malcolm McMahon, whose retirement as leader of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Liverpool, of which the Isle of Man forms a part, was announced on this programme a few weeks ago. Bishop John Sherrington will be Archbishop Malcolm's successor, beginning his ministry in Liverpool in late May. And it was announced last evening that when Monsignor John Devine retires, as he's announced he will be doing at the end of the summer, his place will be taken by none other than Canon Philip Gillespie, who will leave the Beda College at the end of the summer term. He'll be based in the Co-Cathedral of St Mary of the Isle here in Douglas, and we look forward to welcoming him back. Canon Philip has made no secret of his great affection for the island, and in fact, during his time in Rome, has spent all his holidays back on the island. Both Archbishop Malcolm and Monsignor John are retiring to Liverpool, so there's every chance that they'll keep their contacts with the island. And now let's finish with a look at our notice board. Tonight, the Mariners Choir will be in the Bethel Church in Ramsey, where Pastor Kevin Vondy will preach at a service starting at the usual time of 6:30. And the Bethel Church is in Christian Street in Ramsey, just opposite the big Co-op car park. Sandygate Chapel have their first charity event of the year for the Manx Stroke Foundation. It's this Tuesday, April the 29th. Pop into Sandygate Chapel anytime between 10 and 12 noon to enjoy tea, coffee and cakes, and there's a raffle too, with all proceeds benefiting the Manx Stroke Foundation. On Friday, May the 2nd, between 6:30 and 8 p.m, Union Mills Chapel have a Beetle Drive with free entry. Refreshments will be provided, and it is, as always with the Beetle Drive, fun for all ages. If you can count from 1 to 6, roll a dice and hold a pencil, then you're qualified to take part. That's Union Mills Chapel, Friday evening starting at 6:30. And we finish with a look to next weekend. Saturday, the 3rd of May, being the first Saturday of a new month, means that Glenmay Chapel's Craft Market will be open in Glenmay Chapel and Community Centre next Saturday between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. Homemade produce and handicrafts by local artists, gifts, knitwear, jewellery, artwork and much, much more. Entry is free, with homemade light lunches including the famous bacon baps, hot drinks and cakes on sale. If you're not sure where to find Glenmay Chapel and Community Centre, just head for the village and look out for the bunting and the banners. Next Sunday, May the 4th, there'll be another bilingual service at Bigarrow Chapel, just outside Kirkmichael. That's next Sunday afternoon at 2:30. The theme will be Manx, Knots and Crosses, and soloists will include fiddle player Mayan Salmon. There'll also be an opportunity to make the traditional crosh kern. Reverend Dr. Janet Corlett will lead the service, and there'll be refreshments served afterwards. Also, next Sunday, the Mariners Choir will be in Sandygate Chapel for a service starting at 6:30, followed as usual by supper and community hymn singing. And that's all that we have time for now, but I'll be back tonight from 9 with Sundown. We'll begin with Today at the Guild, our first programme from this year's Manx Music Festival, looking at competitions over the first 2 days of the festival and previewing some of the classes to come in the week ahead. And then we'll move into our virtual lounge for a mix of all kinds of music, plus your requests and dedications. And I'd love you to join me if you can. And so, until whenever we meet again, this is Judith saying thank you for listening, and I wish you and those you love a blessed and peaceful week, and a very good morning.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.